Thank you. I think sometimes we just leave the governance side out of it, and it doesn't have a reporting link back here, so I think that will help. Right, the next one is Christopher Baker. I've been wondering who you are.
I've become a part of the furniture, haven't I?
You have. A welcome part.
I've hardly ever spoken in public before, so I don't expect this speech to be too polished. 6 weeks ago, I didn't know very much about the council at all, and or how it worked and all its current tie-up with the Christchurch government. I've been on a huge learning curve since then. At the time of my submission, my learning curve was not quite complete, and I blamed the council for a few things like Victoria Square, when in fact Sarah and the government was to blame, for which I apologise. Like many, I did not understand the legally binding nature of the cost-sharing agreement. Given the constraint that this imposes on the council, we cannot do anything about the stadium or convention centre within the parameters of this particular plan. So what can be decided now? One thing is cycleways, which are outside the cost-sharing agreement. At 162 million, they seem extraordinarily expensive. This is a big expense. I think they will be mainly used for recreation and will have little effect on reducing traffic congestion. As such, they are nice to have, but they're not essential. The council desperately needs this 162 million elsewhere, even if only to offset asset sales. Therefore, I think they should be deferred for at least 10 years. The main thing we need to decide for this 10-year plan is to decide whether to adopt the council version or the People's Choice Common Sense plan. To me, this is a no-brainer. The council plan is truly is a financial nightmare, with enormous rate rises, huge borrowing, and selling half the assets. If this goes through unchanged, Christchurch is probably going to be financially stuffed for decades. If you really look at what's going on in those accounts. On the very first day of submissions, Peter Suckling of the New Zealand Manufacturers and Export Association said that none of his members would adopt such a plan. On the other hand, the Common Sense plan saves or defers nearly $1 billion of spending and thus allows breathing room. It also avoids selling the assets. It may be that aspects of this Common Sense plan concern the 8 of you who voted for the council plan, but these are mostly down the track. Things are so fluid and uncertain at the moment that both plans are likely to be obsolete within 2 or 3 years. Or as former Mayor Gary Moore said yesterday, this long-term plan is just a base case. It will need significant reviewing after 1st of July. But the council plan commits you to selling assets in the 2015-16 year, whereas the Common Sense plan does not. So why not vote for the Common Sense plan as a device to get you past the legal requirement to have a 10-year plan? Then you can review your options in 2 or 3 years' time without having committed yourself to selling the assets. You don't want Jerry Brownings to win, do you? Okay. Could I now refer you to the top page of my handout? This contains material I was not aware of at the time of my submission. I've had these figures confirmed by an accountant, and I've also and a reasonably senior member of the council staff yesterday afternoon. Right. We are told that the funding shortfall is 1.2 billion, but in fact it is nothing like that. It is in fact about 3.8 billion. It would appear that the supposed funding shortfall of 1.2 billion is in fact just an additional amount identified in the last year or two, which is on top of an already large shortfall. So the real funding shortfall is in fact about an enormous 3.8 billion. This is a truly shocking figure. This tells you the magnitude of the financial crisis that the council is potentially in. This is a nightmare and it must be addressed. We now go to the back page of what I've handed out. You'll see what really needs to happen if the council is to have viable finances. In particular, we simply cannot afford the big expensive projects. So how do we get from page 1, this disaster here, to page 3? Obviously, the government has to play ball, and councils should do everything humanly possible to bring this about. The government must be made to see sense about these big projects. The cost-sharing agreement must be entirely torn up. I've suggested ways this might be legally possible in my submission. Then pretty well follow what I said in my submission. I would also question the 60-40 split of costs. 40% is a high percentage to fund for a city that has suffered the biggest natural disaster in New Zealand history. I would think a much fairer split would be 75-25. This would realise a further $700 million from the cost-sharing agreement to the council. Again, this could be done via GST transfer. Okay, so what the council needs to do is the following. 1. Consult with Peter Suckland of the New Zealand Manufacturers and Exporters Association. He will tell you what an awful plan the council one is. None of his members would adopt it. 2. Once enlightened, the council should then vote for the common sense plan. 3. To further cycle waves for at least 10 years, you desperately need this money for other things. 4. Once the plan is over, tackle the government full on to try and get them to see common sense and go with the people, what the people of Christchurch actually want. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the full amount of time that's been allocated for you, so there isn't time for questions. But thank you very much. And, you know, I've really appreciated the fact that you've been here all the way through the hearings, and I've seen you nodding and shaking your head, and it's been great to feel that you've been engaged for the first time ever. So I don't think you've got any worries about being nervous about making your presentation. It was very well done. So thank you very much.
I see a lot of interest in submissions for the rest of the day, so I will be around, hanging around. So if anybody does want to ask me a question personally at tea time or lunchtime, they're welcome. Yeah.
That's fabulous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gavin Bodger.